Thank you very much for coming to speak to us, and especially for speaking about what you've spoken about. It's something that I think we've all picked up on for quite a while now, and it's finally getting out there in the mainstream media. I'm not sure if it's related in some way to safe spaces, but what do you think of Jeremy Corbyn's newer kind of politics, and especially his approach to PMQs? And we hear the platitude quite often that the public don't like PMQs, and if that's the case, why is it the only thing they watch?
What do I think? Let's do PMQs first. The truth is there's a bind about PMQs, which is that there are members of the public who say, why do they shout at each other? It's yah boo, why can't they just do something sensible? And yet the bind is, as Jeremy Corbyn is finding, that when you adopt a softer tone, crudely, you often don't get on the telly or in the newspapers. And therefore, only the people who watch it live, which is, I don't know what the numbers are, it's probably 500,000, 750,000, something like that, or watch it later on playback, which must be a tiny number, actually get to see it, because it's the drama, it's the theatre, the row that tends to get covered. So there is a bind that nobody's solved. It's worth saying that everybody who takes part hates it. Cameron hates it, Miliband loathed it, and Ed had a plan to change it if he'd become Prime Minister, which I discussed with him on a couple of occasions. But nobody has yet found a way through. But on the wider point of new politics, I don't think I know what it is, you know. I mean, I hear a lot of this new politics. Well, what does it mean? If new politics, I'm sorry to be cynical, but if new politics means having a policy for the Labour Party that the leader doesn't agree with, but the Shadow Defence spokesman does agree with, that the Scottish leader doesn't agree with, but the Scottish Party does, I mean, that's not new politics, it's chaos. Now, there is something underneath this new politics thing, which I alluded to in my talk, which is a sense that everything's been too narrow and tight. So if what Jeremy Corbyn can achieve is an openness to debate, I think that's a good thing. So, for example, we should be having a debate about whether spending billions of pounds on nuclear weapons is a good or a bad idea. We should debate it from first principles. We shouldn't debate it on the grounds that when I was your age, people used to lose elections by arguing against nuclear weapons. That's a rubbish argument. The argument has to be, does it keep us safe? Is it worth the cost? If we disarm, will other countries disarm? All the fundamentals. These are proper things that we should debate. And in as much as Jeremy Corbyn means that by new politics, I am all in favour. Because part of the reason I wasn't totally depressed to move on from my job, I mean, I chose to leave it, I should stress, but part of the reason occasionally I thought, you know what, I need to move on now, is a sense that I'd heard the same damn debates endlessly, but very narrow ones. I don't think we ever properly, and I don't think we still have, debated austerity. Not, is it a good thing, are the Tories wicked because they're in favour of austerity? That's not a debate, that's an insult. There's a proper economically based debate, which is, does austerity actually make us poorer rather than richer? You know, you can find Nobel Prize winning economist, Paul Krugman, for example, who will argue that it is counterproductive. Austerity actually makes everybody poorer. It means debt is worse, the deficit is worse, spending cuts long term would be worse. Those are, and in as much as new politics means go back to first principles, have arguments, don't just say, well, somebody thought of that 10 years ago and it didn't work, so we're not going to do it. I think that would be incredibly healthy, but it has to work in both directions. You know, there are some debates that are still seen as not acceptable. I mean, a debate I think we should be having at the moment is, have we as a country decided to opt out of the world? Traditionally this country has played a prominent role in terms of defence, in terms of diplomacy, and the front page of The Guardian is an example of this today, where a series of ex-diplomats, generals and others, say Britain looks weak on the world stage. Because every time we discuss everything, you can't do it because of what happened with Iraq. Now, I would argue that's not an argument. You can't say we won't go into Syria because, well, you can say it, but it's not a conclusive enough point. We should debate whether going into Syria would or would not be a good thing. Again, if I can write your term card when you're president or whoever is president next, you know, that is a fundamental question. Should we be sending ground troops to take on ISIS? Not because I think we should, but because it's the question of your age. the equivalent of my grandparents and the battle against Nazism. It may not be on the same scale, you may wish to argue that it's overblown, but the equivalent in world challenges is the threat posed by ISIS. So debate for your era is, if we really think that, why do we have the fourth largest defence budget in the world, and yet people say you can't ever use it? Because it's wrong to do, because Tony Blair got it wrong 10 years ago. Now, there may be, and people in this room could tell me 5 Rio, it'll make it worse, it'll bring the threat closer to home, it'll produce another terrorist movement. I'm not saying I have a view as to which is the right answer, but it is the debate. And it seems to me the new politics I want is not, look, let 1,000 flowers bloom. It's what used to be called at the BBC, cut the crap, get to the nub of things, and actually have that argument.